everyone. Welcome. As they refill their tea, we're just going to get started. My name is Erin Shea, and I'm the head of adult programming here at Darien Library. I would just like to briefly mention that programs here are made possible by our annual Friends of the Library campaign. So thank you so much for your continued support to make author events and teas like these available to the community. Today's guest is an honors graduate of Stanford University with an MBA from Columbia. She spent several years in New York and London as a corporate and communications strategy consultant, but now she lives with her husband and 4 children right here on the Connecticut shore over in Greenwich. She is the author of the international bestseller Overseas, which hopefully some of you have had a chance to read. She's here today to talk about her book 100 Summers, just out now in paperback, although I bet she will also mention her book The Secret Life of Violet Grant, which is coming out this month on May 27th. Oh, the Oprah magazine called 100 Summers a fast-paced love story. The scorching sun illuminates a friend's betrayal and reignites a romance. Please join me in welcoming to Darien Library, Ms. Beatriz Williams.
Hi there, and thank you everyone for coming out on this lovely spring day. And at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I know as a mom, I know there's a lot of stuff going on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So for those of you who found a babysitter, I appreciate that. It's great to see so many faces here. And thank you very much to the Darien Library for this terrific welcome and this great spread of food over here. This is definitely one of the more culinarily fortuitous talks I've ever been to. Wine and cheese is usually more the order of the day, but I think afternoon tea is great too. And I think in some ways, just as apropos, although if any of you have read 100 Summers, I think many of you have, a lot of drinking takes place. They've just come out of the Depression, they've just come out of Prohibition, and they're drowning their sorrows while they can. But afternoon tea certainly would have been served at the Seaview Beach Club. I am from near Seattle, Washington. So when I moved to the East Coast after college, and I was an anthropology major at Stanford, which my parents loved, I made up for it with going to business school later. But I was very fascinated by this whole, you guys have a whole different culture here than we had when I was growing up, especially the beach culture. And I was fortunate to meet a wonderful man within 6 months of moving to the East Coast. We were engaged about 1.5 years later, and I was sort of flung into this whole business of going to these, summer beach communities, and I was fascinated by the way, my mother-in-law, for example, they've gone to the Seabright Beach Club down in New Jersey since her parents were, before they even got married. So the key to the bathhouse has been in the family since the 1920s. So I'm hanging up my, swimsuit in the same hooks. I mean, these definitely look like the same hooks. That they were hanging up their long cotton, bathing costumes back in the day. That's something that would never happen where I came from. It was fascinating. We'd sit down to the table, and have our, our waspy snacks, the Cheese Whiz and the Ritz crackers, and you know what I mean. And people would come by and talk to my mother-in-law, and people she had known since they were splashing together in the toddler pool, when she was 2 and 3 years old, and they would have this discussion, and they'd go through everybody they know, and so at Harvard, and so at Princeton, and Scooter, and Cricket, and all these people, and then the guy would walk away, and she'd be like, oh, I just can't stand you. And I thought, wow, I thought you guys were best friends, but there's this whole thing where you're nice to somebody and you carry on this ersatz friendship when in fact you just can't stand each other. And all of this is just fascinating to me, the whole generational thing, and coming back to the same place and carrying on these relationships with people. So I had always loved that. And another thing I was very interested in when I came to the East Coast. In Seattle, we have no hurricanes. We have a lot of rain, but no hurricanes. I mean, Seattle is about drizzle, a lot of drizzle. But here, you know, you have these torrential storms, and then you got the nor'easters coming in, and then every once in a while, about once every 100 years or so, you get a hurricane. And in 1938, as we all know, there was a tremendous hurricane that hit New England. And what, to me, was so fascinating about this hurricane, got me interested in it, was Katharine Hepburn. My in-laws are up in Old Lyme. And if any of you are familiar with Old Lyme, it's right there on the banks of the Connecticut River, right where it goes out into Long Island Sound. And across from Old Lyme is Old Saybrook. And in Old Saybrook, there's this lovely, classic summer community called Fenwick. Fenwick is beautiful. My in-laws kind of drove me through a couple of times, and this was you know, back in the late 90s. And they said, oh yes, and there's Katharine Hepburn's house. And then they said, oh, of course, that's the new house that was built after the old one was washed away in the hurricane. And I said, wow, what hurricane? And they said, oh, the hurricane of 1938, it blew the house down. And I said, wow, that must have been some hurricane to take on Katharine Hepburn and win. You know, and poor old Katharine, you know, she just shot her best 9 holes of golf ever that morning. Because guess what? They didn't know this storm was coming. And really, it wasn't just that this was, you know, they didn't have the scale back then. But this was about between Category 3, Category 4 storm by the time it actually hit the mainland. And obviously, tremendous force. But the real problem was the surprise. Because in 1938, you didn't have satellites. And you didn't have Doppler radar. What you had was charts, you know, showing, gosh, you know, 99 hurricanes have done this, so the 100th will do that as well. And what hurricanes usually do, as we know, and by the way, if there are any hurricane experts in the audience, please zip it, okay? I don't want to hear it. If I'm making a mistake, you can come up to me quietly later and point it out to me. I don't want to be humiliated publicly, but anyway, you know, they tend to form off the coast of Africa or the Cape Verde Islands. And then they gather strength as they go across the Atlantic. Sometimes they go south to the Gulf of Mexico. Sometimes they hit the Caribbean islands. Sometimes they hit Florida or the Carolinas. And then they hook right off to sea. And what we really hope is that they don't even touch land. They just sort of do that hook far enough east that nobody gets hurt. Well, back in, and nobody, I can't believe nobody has pointed this out to me. I did make a little change in history for artistic license. And in the book you'll see, oh, there's this hurricane that's just hit the Florida Keys. Actually, that happened, I think, in 1935 or 6, not in 1938, but I wanted, just for the sense of the dramatic action, to say, as sort of the warning bell in the night there, you know, there are hurricanes that hit. So it had hit the Florida Keys as a Category 5 storm and absolutely wiped out the Florida Keys, destroyed railroads. You know, this party of war veterans was just washed away. They were working on the railroad there. So the United States government had set up a weather bureau to track hurricanes. And so they were using these, you know, these old-fashioned tools to track hurricanes. And there were all these old salts in there. They knew what hurricanes did. They were convinced of it. There was one young guy in the National Weather Service that year. He had just graduated from college, and he was full of, you know, new ideas. And he's looking at the map, and this is in the middle of September in 1938. And he's looking at this map and saying, you know, I have seen this hurricane come through, and we're all worried it's going to hit Florida, and maybe it will. But what I'm seeing is that there's this ridge of pressure over the Appalachians, and I'm seeing that the Bermuda High, which is this high pressure system, is usually over Bermuda, hence the name, is further north this year. So that, to me, that seems like an alleyway that's just going to squeeze that hurricane and shoot it northward instead of looking right. And of course, all the guys in the National Weather Service said, what do you know, you young whippersnapper, hurricanes don't go north. So they had issued that morning, Tuesday, the 21st of September, they had issued the forecast for the day was supposed to be sunny skies, kind of breezy, but just in the afternoon as you get these sort of far, far wisps of this hurricane that's out to sea. Ships stayed in port, and of course ships were the ones who would tell you if there was a hurricane there because they're the ones in it. So nobody knew this thing was coming. So it's off the coast of the Carolinas Monday night. by Tuesday noon, about 2:30 actually, it hits Long Island. And it has gone up north at the speed of 60 miles an hour. That is the travel speed of this hurricane. The wind speed, of course, is around 150 miles an hour. But the travel speed is 60 miles an hour. It's driving like like it's driving on a freeway up the coast. And what happens when you have a hurricane going that fast is you push that storm surge. So if you were on the coast of, on the southern coast of Long Island that day in the early afternoon, and you looked out to sea, and the clouds were kind of gathering, you saw what looked like a bank of yellow fog on the horizon. And as that bank of yellow fog started to roll in, you realized, hopefully early enough, that it wasn't actually fog. It was the storm surge. It was a 15 to 20 foot high wall of water. It wasn't, this sort of storm surge that rises out. It is a tsunami of a storm surge, and they didn't know it was coming. So it hits Long Island, bam, knocks out power, knocks down houses, knocks out all communications, so nobody in the path of the storm knows this thing is coming. So you get to the Connecticut-Rhode Island border, which is where 100 Summers takes place. And they're all sitting there, and of course it's the third week of September, so a lot of people have left their summer houses and returned to the city already. There's a lot of women and children there. It's a Tuesday. They're packing up, getting ready to go. So young children who aren't in school yet, mothers who have sort of packed everyone up because everyone's finally gone off to boarding school and so on. And the breeze picks up, the wind picks up. You look out to sea, and about 3:30 in the afternoon is when this thing hit, and it hit the mainland United States with such force that it set off seismographs in Alaska. That is how powerful this storm surge was when it came around. So naturally I was fascinated reading about all this. And one of the stories that truly fascinated me was what happened on Napatree Point, which is, I don't know if you've been there, if you've been to Watch Hill, Rhode Island. Watch Hill, beautiful, beautiful summer community, been there for ages. And Napatree is still a spit of land that comes off of Watch Hill. I'll show you Napatree right here. And this is Napatree in the 30s. Actually, I believe it was the summer of 1938 right here. And you can see what they're wearing. And one of the things, one of the strains that goes through Untitled Chapter, there's a lot of change going on. And to me, the whole period between the wars is just fascinating because the real sexual revolution was not in the 60s. Obviously, there was a big sexual revolution there. The real change in attitude came in the 1920s, after the First World War. There was this sense, we really transitioned there from a society and culture that, despite all this modernism that was coming in the early part of the century, was still steeped in the romantic tradition of the 19th century. And I say romantic with a capital R, the Romantic movement. So we had these high ideals. We had these notions of right and wrong. We went off to war for patriotism, for honor, for this sense of idealism, because you had this sense that unless you put yourself to the test, you really weren't a man. So you went off to war with your flag flying, and of course you were mowed down as soon as you went over the top by machine gun bullets. And this is on both sides, the Germans and the Allies as well. So after the war, you had this profound sense of disillusionment, this sense that the rules and morals and this sense of right and wrong and these high ideals have gotten us nothing but just social, civilizational suicide. So that was when you started seeing things like this really scandalous types of swimsuits that, come down in here. You don't even wear stockings anymore, these women, when they're out at the beach. They cover their legs for everyone to see. It's really shocking. And not only that, but men and women are mixing together on the beach. They're playing together on the beach, frolicking, nearly naked. It's really, really shocking. And of course, we all know what happens then. And don't forget, they're going to college together now. Coeducation has really blossomed after the war. As prosperity comes, you have a lot more women going to college, because what could be a greater sign of excess spending money than sending a girl to college? Because what could possibly be more useless than sending a girl to college? She's just going to get married afterwards. So when you send your girls off to college to say, hey, I am so rich, I can send my daughter to college. So all this stuff is happening. You get the rise of the automobile. You have the end of Prohibition. Don't forget women are voting now. You have the dislocation caused by the Great Depression. You had the invention of the latex condom in the early 1920s. And not only that, legislation that allowed it to be sold in drugstores instead of, you know, under the table. So all of this stuff combines to have a much freer sexual atmosphere. We don't think of it now, but it really was. It was a much freer sexual atmosphere, certainly compared to the years before the war. So anyway, that's kind of the social background. So we're here frolicking on the beach before the war. Right before the hurricane, 1938. And if you see right there at the very top right corner, that's Napatri. So it's this beautiful spit of land that comes out. And it's got about 40-odd beach cottages, this beautiful classic New England shingled beach cottages out there. And they are just gorgeous, and people have been summering there for generations. They come back, there's a small club. And then the hurricane hits. Let's see if I've got these in the right order. It's been a while since I've done this. Oh, sorry. So here we are, just more social stuff here. See, look at the high cut on that swimsuit. I mean, it's really, you know, it's really scandalous. And the man, his chest is bare, ladies. Bare, I tell you. Here we are again. I've got these wonderful pictures of Napatri before the storm. You can see, you know, this is a place for children to meet every year. It's a beautiful spot. This is Watch Hill, this is about the beginning of Napatri right there. That's where Napatri starts. And this is Napatri the day after the storm. All the houses are gone. It basically had taken out all the houses within minutes. If you survived, it was because you managed to grab onto something that floated, a door, a section of roof, a section of fencing, anything that floated, and you managed, in the teeth of this hurricane, to get yourself across the Little Narragansett Bay to the Connecticut mainland, which was, of course, pouring with water and swamped, and a train had just been stranded, and the college kids were like rescuing the little kids, you know. It was really absolute mayhem. And then it was over pretty quickly, and then all you could do was count the destruction. So here you can see the effect of a storm surge. You can see right there, this was a large enough structure that it didn't actually fall down. But you can see what happened there on the side that was exposed to the storm surge, and just how high that wall of water was. You can see how high it reached up there. That was how high that wall of water managed to reach. Structures all up and down the coast were undermined. You can see where it was undercut there. This was even a little bit further up, but it still managed to have its lower stories cut out from beneath. Again, the same story here. You can see how they were just literally like someone cutting you off at the knee. So, oh well, and there's my next book. I'll move back here. We don't need to quite be advertising that yet. Oh, well, except I can't because this is not my forte. Well, anyway, there it is. There's the next book. So I had looked at this, what happened to Napatri, and I said to myself, this is a great story, a tragic story. But I'm a novelist, and I look at things in this sort of story arc, and I see that you have this long, hot, sweaty summer, which is what happens when the Bermuda High is north. So watch out for these long, hot, sweaty, rainy summers, because that's when you tend to get the hurricanes. And you have this long summer in this classic old New England beach community with all this change seething in there. And then at the very end of summer, you have this massive storm that washes everything away. And I said, well, that's a story arc right there. So I started imagining in my head this community that I didn't call it Napatri. I wanted to distance myself a little bit because I know the memory is still very sensitive to a lot of people who can remember it. I distanced myself a little bit. I renamed it. I changed the geography a bit. But I did create this summer community. And I said, well, you've got these sort of old New Englanders there. And you know, what disrupts an old New England community the most? And that's when you bring in an outsider. And I thought, well, who would really be an outsider in this old 30s New England community? And I said, well, you could have somebody who's African American, or you could have somebody who's Jewish. And I thought it would be more subtle to introduce somebody who's Jewish, because there you had a lot of prejudice that was under the surface. It was the gentleman's agreement. So you didn't go face to face and sling insults, but it was just these subtle things, you know, not inviting someone to something, just excluding people from conversations, excluding people from a sense of acceptance within the community. So I was thinking, and one of the things that sort of got me thinking in this direction was actually Edith Wharton's book, House of Mirth. I don't know how many of you read House of Mirth. I did not actually name Lily, who's the main character in 100 Summers After Lily Bart in House of Mirth. My daughter actually named Lily. I was just starting 100 Summers, and my daughter wandered up to me. She was 8, I think, years old at the time, and she said, "Oh, Mommy, remember you told me I could name a character in your next book?" And I said, "I don't remember saying that. Why did I say that?" And she said, "No, you promised you did." And I was like, "All right, I'll play along." I was like, "Well, what name did you have in mind?" And she kind of tilts her head and she says, "What about Lily?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, that's perfect. That's perfect, you're a genius." So she's actually named a character in my book that I'm working on now. I'm like, "Anna, I need a name, give me a name." And she just gives me the she's like, I can loan her out. If you need anything going on, a dog that needs naming, anything, she's very good. I was thinking of the House of Mirth. And Lily Bart, you have this old New Yorker, very much from the Knickerbocker family. Her father dies, and it turns out there's no money left. So she's got to marry her way back into the world that she knows. And unfortunately, one suitor after another just kind of doesn't work out, and she's left with this Jewish man. And now, as much as I love Edith Wharton and her writing and her social perception, and obviously just the beauty of the writing itself, it's very hard for me to forgive her for what she does with this character, because he's Shylock. I mean, he is, I think the word greasy gets used at one point. I mean, it's really awful. It's a very stereotypical, classic, Jewish guy on Wall Street, and she just, he's everything the stereotype includes. Very hard to forgive her for that, especially because he makes an offer for Lily and says, "Look, your money problems will disappear, I'll marry you, and then you'll give me the social acceptance I need to get into these higher circles." And the point of the book is that, and I'm going to give the spoiler away because it's 100 years old now, so you should have read it by now. If you haven't, too bad. Lily actually, this is presented as very Faustian bargain. She actually dies in a basement apartment rather than marry this guy. And this is presented as a good thing. It's sort of like, well, this was really the best thing she could do is die rather than marry the Jew. That's how, that's how ingrained this was. And so I thought, well, what if she had? What if she had said, this guy's really not so bad if you get to know him, and maybe we can, maybe we can forge a partnership together. Maybe we can learn to love each other. And what if she had done that, and what if they had a child? So that child is Nick Greenwald, who falls in love with Lily at the beginning of 100 Summers. Also there, at the time they fall in love, is Lily's best friend, Budgie, who is dating the star fullback on the Dartmouth football team, whose name is Graham Pendleton. So we start out there at Dartmouth, and everyone's falling in love, and everyone's happy, and we think, okay, great, this is this wonderful romance, everyone's going to get married and have kids and live happily ever after. But of course, this is a novel, so it doesn't work out that way. So we fast forward to the summer of 1938. Lily is back at Seaview. She's taking care of her 6-year-old sister, Kiki. Her mother is kind of a bit distant, not too much in the picture there. And who should arrive at Seaview for the summer but her best friend Budgie, who used to summer there with her and has been away for a long time. And she's brought with her new husband, who is Nick Greenwald. So we go through back and forth between 1938 and 1931 to 32, and we find out what happened with Nick and Lily back in the early 30s, that things didn't work out for them, and we negotiate this very complicated love triangle that turns into a bit of a love quadrangle about halfway through the book, and then find out how all this is resolved. Lily and Nick and Budgie and Graham and little Kiki and Mom and Aunt Julie. Who's read the book? Yes, Aunt Jay. Who loves Aunt Julie? Aunt Julie was a real character. My sister-in-law, Melissa Williams, has snuck in there. She's in the back. She's heard a few Aunt Julie stories. I usually don't include, everyone always wants to know, oh, well, do you use people from real life in your books? And I generally don't. Aunt Julie's the exception. Aunt Julie's long gone. I've never actually met her. But the stories of the family are legendary. She was a flapper in the 20s. She was the family rebel. She did actually, a lot of the sayings, of Aunt Julie's sayings from the book are actually sayings that are passed down from the real Aunt Julie. Aunt Julie did sneak out at night from their townhouse in the Upper East Side to go and date Ty Cobb. He was a jerk, for the record. And so there is this Aunt Julie. She seemed to be such a vibrant character. So many great Aunt Julie stories. But what was interesting to me was that even though she was kind of a rebel, I mean, she was a flapper, and she engaged in all these activities that were so, at the time, were really pushing the boundaries socially. And yet in the end, she got married, had children, and to a certain extent, she was still a guardian of this same society, civilization, world, whatever you want to call it, that she was sort of rebelling against. So there's this tension there, that on the one hand, she is this character who is, who's considered, she's a divorcee, in the book she is, but at the same time, she's the one who really holds everything together and makes sure you can have fun, but you still got to play by the rules. And to me, that was a very interesting thing about the real life Aunt Julie, because she did, live in Park Avenue and so on, and she did have, in the end, this very traditional life, and just the tension between her being such a larger-than-life character, and yet still, being, I guess, a zookeeper of the zoo, to me was really interesting. So I tried to capture that in the Aunt Julie in the book. And Aunt Julie does appear in another cameo in The Secret Life of Violet Grant, which is May 27th. So with that, I will open it up to questions. You can ask anything about the history, about my next book, about the characters, writing life, how do I get it all done with 4 kids? Everyone wants to know that. Yes?
Have you been approached yet to have this made into a film?
Well, obviously that would be the dream. I have heard nothing yet. My agent did move recently over to ICM, so we'll see what happens. No, I mean, I think they like to wait and see. So the more copies you buy, ladies and gentlemen, the more likely it is that we will get a movie deal. So fingers crossed on that one. I think it would certainly be a lot of fun. I'd love to sit there at the casting session, that's for sure.
How did you first get interested in writing?
I think like most writers, I can certainly say that I have really always wanted to write. And I used to sit there and write horror stories when I was little, and I always wanted to write. My father is British, and he grew up in London after the war, in constant rationing and so on. And so he really was very focused on me being practical and getting a job that I could actually make a living at. And he was right. And he said, well, another thing he said was that the problem with so many writers is that all they want to do is write, so then they end up writing about nothing but writing. Now, how many, Lily does have journalistic ambitions. It's true, but there are so many books about writers, and it's like, gosh, there are other professions out there, and it's true. And I think I'm glad now that I turned to it after having many years in a professional career and raising kids and so on, because I think it does give you a little more perspective that the world is not just populated by alcoholic male writers and the women who enable them as well. Yes?
Do you have a favorite character in the book?
I keep forgetting I'm supposed to repeat the question from the audience. So the question was, do I have a favorite character in the book? I don't know. They're like your kids. How do you pick a favorite? I guess for me, it was definitely fun to write Aunt Julie. She's one of those characters that kind of writes herself. And it's funny how a voice just pops into your head. And the character of Vivian in The Secret Life of Violet Grant is a lot, she has that kind of Aunt Julie gene a little bit. And she was so much fun to write. It really is, and it's funny how I'm not like that at all. The voice just popped right out of me. So it's interesting, the characters that you have, hidden in your subconscious, waiting to get out. It was a really fun experience. Yes?
The little girl, Kiki, did you use one of your own children as, she's really a beautiful child in here. I really liked it.
Oh, good. Oh, I'm so glad. Well, I do have 4 kids.
Yes, so you must have taken something from your own children.
Well, so kids can be, you know, what I love about kids is how precocious they can be, and the things they can say that kind of startle you as a parent, and you sort of, wow, I didn't think of it that way, or I didn't, you know, it's such a fresh, lovely, clever way of looking at things, and you think that kids, and yes, they don't have, you know, the intellectual capacity of a grown-up, but they have their own incredible perspective, and that's what I love about you know, writing child characters, is because they can sometimes be the truth tellers that the grown-ups either can't see or won't say. Yes?
How do you write? What is your schedule?
I have a very disciplined schedule. I'm gonna have him ask me to write 2 books next year. So I think I'm a little busy. And so what I do, I can't write at home. And you know, women, I'm sure you can understand why that is, because you're at home, you're doing something, you get a little stuck, and oh, you can go fold the laundry upstairs, you can handle the dishes in the sink, you can tidy up the kids' rooms, make the beds, there's so many things you could be doing. So I had to get out of the house in order to write. Luckily, my youngest started kindergarten this year, which is a full day. She's on the bus at 8 and she comes back home at 3 o'clock. So the kids get on the bus, the kids are all on the bus by 8 in the morning. And some mornings I go running, so that takes an extra hour, but then the latest I'm sitting down either at the diner or at Starbucks. I would love to go to the Greenwich Library, but they don't let me bring my coffee inside to write with, and as we all know, yeah, oh, well, then I don't love it. The problem is you've got that stupid traffic in between, you know, Stanford and you just never know. So, yeah, no coffee, no writing. So I go to Starbucks or to my local diner, and I try to sit there until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then head home and get some errands done before the kids are home, and then it's, you know, soccer and show lessons and everything. So it's a busy schedule, but you know, I think it helps that being a mom and just having to be very disciplined every day about getting it done. And my house is a mess, don't come over, we'll go meet somewhere else. But you know, you have to figure out, well, what's important. And it's more important to me, certainly more fun to sit down and write and play in my world than to have my house spick and span in case my in-laws drop by. She left, okay, good. In case my in-laws drop by without asking, which they do, really. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I just, you know, I'm sorry, the kitchen's a mess. But you just have to prioritize, so that's how I get it done. Yes?
Did you have a mentor, someone who encouraged you?
You know, I actually didn't. My husband is incredibly supportive, even when before I had any expectation of getting, or certainly an expectation, you always want to think positive, but before I was at a point of being able to be published, he would take care of the kids for me for 4 or 5 days when I went off to a conference and took some workshops and sort of, got my craft going. And I did have a very useful meeting after I sort of finished my first manuscript, which shall forever remain under my bed. But the wife of a friend of my husband's works at Tor, which is actually a science fiction imprint. So it was actually very easy to meet with her because I'm not writing science fiction. I said, I'd just give me some advice with no pressure, because I'm obviously not going to submit anything to you. And so she actually offered to look at the manuscript and tell me, what I needed to work on in terms of the storytelling craft. So I owe her an eternal debt of gratitude for not only being very encouraging and say, yes, the writing's good, but also, here's what you need to do as a storyteller. You need to keep the reader on the page every single page. Do not give the reader an excuse to get up. You want the reader to take this book to the bathroom with them because they can't put it down. There should always be something interesting going on. And it's not just that you've got a big secret or something that they're waiting to see what happens. You don't want them flipping forward. You want them to still be, I really want to know what happens, but I'm so interested in what's happening in this scene particularly. That's a really, really hard thing to do, and when you can pull that off, you really feel like you've nailed it. Yes?
Can you tell us a little bit about your new book?
I would be happy to. My husband's family, they are the gift that keeps on giving. I got another great story idea that's been percolating in my head for a long time. Since it's right here, so I don't have to make it all up. I will read to you here from the back, and this is where I got the first idea. The family story described in the opening page of this book belongs to my husband's grandfather. So Mr. Henry Elliot, who was in Europe. Let's see, here we go. I'll read the beginning. I actually start out with a real teaser. In the summer of 1914, a beautiful 38-year-old American divorcee named Caroline Thompson took her 22-year-old son, Mr. Henry Elliot, on a tour of Europe to celebrate his recent graduation from Princeton University. The outbreak of the First World War turned the family into refugees, and according to legend, Mrs. Thompson ingeniously negotiated her own fair person in exchange for safe passage across the final border from Germany. And you know what I mean by that. A suitcase, however, was inadvertently left behind. In 1950, the German government tracked down a surprised Mr. Elliot and issued him a check in the amount of 100 Deutschmarks as compensation for lost luggage. As I say in the opening, this is not their story, but that's where I got the idea. So my husband's great-great-grandmother, who was very much an Aunt Julie kind of character, she had already been divorced twice at this point. She had married, she'd run off with her first husband at the age of, I think, 15, had her son at age 16. She was from a very, wealthy upper crust family, and just like, I'm out of here. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to play by your rules and have my debutante party. And this was like 1895, I think. So I know, an extraordinary woman. And so they were actually in Europe in the summer of 1914. They got all caught up in the outbreak of the war and had to flee and sort of get out of Germany. And they got to the final border, and the guard said, well, you don't have the right papers, so I can't let you cross. But, may I say, that's a fine dress you're wearing. And one thing led to another. She spent the night with him, yada, yada, yada. She got the pass. And one of the things she told her, you have to actually eat the pass after you go through, because I don't want any record that this ever happened. So anyway, that's kind of what happened. And I took the bare bones of that, and I said, great, Americans, 1914, outbreak of war, we're trying to get out of Germany. And I brought kind of all those elements into it. And then, of course, a suitcase gets left behind. In my book, I had it the actual suitcase come back to the family in 1964. I liked the symmetry of 50 years to 1964 and then another 50 years to 2014. So it comes back into the hands of the great niece of Violet, who is in 1914 in Berlin with her husband. Meets a very interesting young man by the name of Lionel Richardson, and the story that's passed down very quietly within the family, because this is the Schuyler family. It's the same family. It's Lily's maternal family, so we see a lot of the same characters. Nick and Lily turn up a couple of times in cameos, and of course, as we know, the Schuylers like to keep their secrets, and so Vivian is surprised to learn that her great-aunt Violet was supposed to have killed her husband and married her lover and run off right before the outbreak of the First World War. And so she says, my goodness, because she is Vivian, and she's a very vibrant character, and she's working at a magazine in New York City. And of course, because she's a woman, she's busy fetching coffees. But she wants a great investigative piece to show that she can be a journalist too. She takes this on, uncovers what happened to her great-aunt Violet in 1914, and in fact, what happened to Violet changes Vivian forever. So that's the book. Yes.
Do you ever get on a path and you can hear your character saying, no, 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 I don't want to go that. You can't make me do that, or dream that. I
will tell you what is happening with my current book. I get my stories from all sorts of places, and I read several years ago. This is a book that I'm writing. This will be out a year and a half from now. So I'm writing it now, and I was reading a great piece about this car that had been brought up for auction, that had been sitting in a shed at the Homestead Inn in Greenwich since the 1950s or something. And it was this black special edition Mercedes Roadster from 1936, and it had been driven by this glamorous German baroness who had this Jewish lover, and of course, because it was 1936 in Germany, she had to flee and blah, blah, blah. So I thought, great story. So I twisted around a bit because it's tough, and I always have to think commercially. So it's very tough for me as a commercial author to have a non-American character as my central character. So even if they're in Europe, I try to make them American or have some American links so that readers feel really more connected. American readers feel more connected. So I turned her into an American who's actually half French and half American, so on and so forth. So I'm writing this book, and I'm about 250 pages into it. And the worst possible thing that can happen to a writer happened to me. I go to open the file, and it won't open. I think this is not a problem. I mean, it's still there. You can still see it in the preview. I took it to the Apple Store. I took it to the wizards at my publisher and said, do you have they told me, a forensic person who can work on this. And they couldn't open it. The file had been corrupted. This is the first time, mind you. And then I found out that I had thought my iCloud was backing it up, and it wasn't. I usually at that point emailed it around somewhere, so I've got some copy somewhere. Nothing. So I could have cried, and I didn't. But what I said was, you know, I was having this weird feeling for a while that I was just going the wrong direction. And so I'm rewriting it now in a completely different way, and it's a much easier write, and I'm really enjoying it. And so maybe, you know, I was like, why couldn't you have told me at page 50? Why did you have to tell me at page 250? But anyway, so I'm being very brave about it and rewriting the whole thing. And I'm just about where I was, about 250 pages in now. So, and I'm backing it up, yes. Although somehow I feel very confident the file is not going to get corrupted this time because I'm writing the right story. Sorry. This is drama, yes. So it was like I needed more problems. I know. Anyone else? Yes.
Was it hard to get your manuscript published? How many places did you have to?
Yes, I was lucky enough. So I wrote. When I wrote overseas, I had written 2 other manuscripts. Again, good practice, but not quite there. So I got the idea for overseas, and the idea for overseas, I was sitting and I'd been obsessed with the First World War. And I had this idea for a First World War infantry officer, and he was walking the streets of Midtown Manhattan. And I couldn't figure out what to do them. It sort of stewed in my brain for a year, and then finally it all clicked together, and I wrote overseas in about 6 weeks. And I finished it. It needed a lot of editing. I edited a lot. But I really felt like this was the one. I felt like I had a great concept. I felt like I had really captured the storytelling aspect of keeping the reader on the page. So this was the one I sent out to agents, and I picked 5 agents that I thought I wanted a young agent at a respected agency. So someone who was taking on clients and being very aggressive about it, but still someone who was, you know, at a respectable agency that, you know, would get attention. And I wanted just someone who was, you know, was commercial but also appreciated good writing, just a number of things. And I found my current agent, Alexandra Machinist. She read the manuscript over the weekend and immediately got back to me and said she wanted to represent me. And it was good. So I think it's more like, you know, when everything comes together and you really just have that manuscript you know is the right one, you have to be honest with yourself. You have to be able to cut off the 2 manuscripts you wrote before that are your babies, but they're just not good enough. And you have to say, okay, you know, I'm going to start over and start a new one, and this is the one. And once you find an agent, my agent is terrific. I cannot say enough about her. She's amazing. She moved from where she was to Jane Cole Nesbitt, and they're amazing there. And now she's at ICM. She's just an amazing, amazing agent who just does everything for me. And I love her. So she sold it actually very quickly once, you know, we sort of got it all together and did a few edits, and we sold it to Putnam. And then my editor, of course, left for a different publishing company about 5 months before release, so it left me an orphan, but luckily they put me with another editor who was really terrific, so very happy at Putnam.
Were you surprised at the covers that they come up with?
Well, I'll tell you, so 100 Summers, they came up with that right away, and we looked at it and said, oh my God, this is to die for. We loved it. And the action, I don't think I have a copy, yeah, there's no sign. The original cover for The Secret Life of Violet Grant was very, very pretty. It just didn't quite have the same magic to it. So my agent went back to them and said, we need something different. This is just not great enough. So they came up with this one, and we took one look and said, yes, this is it exactly. All we did was have them add the little suitcase down there at the bottom. And they're very happy with that. So I know it's the same designer who did 100 Summers. And what they do is they take these vintage photographs. It's an actual photograph. It's vintage photographs, and they hand tint it on Photoshop or whatever they do. So when you get it blown up, like in a poster, I mean, it's actually this amazing photographic detail. Like there's this texture in her dress that just really comes out. So it's a really, they do a wonderful, wonderful job. And actually, here's a funny story. When I first moved to New York and I worked for this tiny little, communication strategy firm, it actually was in the same kind of smallish building. It's the Saatchi & Saatchi building down in on Hudson Street, right near so the Greenwich Village Soho border. And as it happened, Penguin is in that same building. So of all the buildings in New York, that's the one. And not only that, but the place the area we used to work on, the second floor, is now inhabited by the Putnam Art Department. So the universe just works that way. I love it. And if I try to write that into a book, people be like, then there's this really ridiculous situation where, the art department, is in the same place. But it's true, these things happen in real life. That's what, you can make stuff up that just is not as cool and serendipitous as it is in real life.
We have time for one more question if someone has another one.
Actually, is it okay if I mention Beatrice's next event? So,
oh yes.
Well, maybe Beatrice, you would tell me.
Yes, I'm very excited. So one of the great things for me about this whole writing gig is that I have met some amazing writers who are now my BFFs. We just love each other because we all sort of get each other in the way we think. So one of my dear friends is Karen White. I met her at a conference a few years ago, and now we have this little writing sabbatical we take together every year. We have a lot of fun. And we also have this great rapport on stage we've discovered. So we're going to try this. We're doing a few events together this year. She's got her own book out, which is A Long Time Gone, which I've read. It's fantastic. I helped her plot it a little bit. Whenever we get into trouble now, we call each other up and say, okay, I've got this situation. Who gets her pregnant? This guy or that guy? And we work it through together, who's the daddy? And we just have a lot of fun. And so Karen's also writing a short story in an anthology about a Grand Central Terminal, and that's out at the, I think, end of June. So on July 2nd, Karen and I are going to team up at Barrett at 7 p.m. in the evening. So Karen's going to talk about her book about Grand Central, and it's a collection of short stories that all take place that start in a sort of chance meeting at Grand Central, and then blossom into something else somewhere else. So it's really, I can't wait to read that one. It's going to be really great, and so we'll be going back and forth, wine in hand. It's going to be I'm telling you, when we're together, we're pretty. Karen is one of the funniest people I know, so do not miss it. Seriously, it's going to be really fun, and of course, Barrett always puts on a great event. So the nibbles at I went to. An event there a few days ago, and the nibbles were fantastic. Oh my gosh, I need the recipe for that what was it, the cheese one? With the, oh, so good. So anyways, do not miss it. It's really, we're going to be a lot of fun together, and we just can't wait. Karen and I are like, oh, I can't wait. So anyway, we're going to have fun, so you'll have fun.